So welcome to another Living Bridges conversation. We're joined today by Miki Kashtan, and this is a really special conversation for me. I'm very excited to do this, mostly because a lot of the work that I've done has been directly impacted by Miki. Miki, thank you so much for being here. And yeah.
It's just really such a delight. You know, I turned down most invitations now to most things, and this was an immediate yes.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, and I want to say why, because I so totally value and appreciate and admire the work that you do. I see it as a model for what can be done with NVC all over the world, and I want to support it.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for saying that. And I also want to say that so much of this, so much of what started happening a couple of years ago now for enCOMPASSion and for me has to do with, I can't put it in different words, but like a birth of courage and audacious dreaming that happened when I attended your workshop back in, I think, 2018 or 2017 or something like that. And it just somehow opened this idea of nonviolent communication up for me. And it tied it up with the possibility of actually living this in community, in connection with other people for more than just my own circles. And I found that very, very powerful. And I want to just mention that Miki's work has been inspiring many NVC practitioners across the world for years now. A lot of her writings are available on The Fearless Heart. I don't know if I ever told you this, but the way I came to know about you was I was looking for something about grief. And I came across how you had written about your grief and processing that grief when your sister passed away. And I found that to be the most poignant way to deal with it and process it. And that was the first encounter I ever had with you for your work. And then to find that that kind of deep inner work translates to community work through your work with convergent facilitation and through all of these projects which we're getting excited about, which is the nonviolent global liberation and other bits. So this is turning into a bit of a exploration of how much I adore you, but I want to, and that's fine. And at the same time, I would like to maybe invite you to share a bit about yourself. Like, how did you come to the work you do? Why do you do it? And maybe we just start there and see where we go.
I think I'm going to start long ago when I was 5. And I went with my mother to the store. I don't remember this, but she told me. We went into the store to get groceries. And I asked her, why do we need to pay? Why can't we just take what we need and go? And she told me she didn't actually have an answer. And no one so far has been able to give me a convincing answer. So I have retained, sometimes it went underground when I was overwhelmed by the forces of scarcity, separation, and powerlessness that are completely within all of life at this time in human evolution. I became overwhelmed and it went underground, but it never went away. The utter conviction that it is entirely possible to create a social order that globally cares for everyone. And that was kind of like a little flame. And that flame, the most visible way that it stayed in me is that I never agreed to the, you know, for lack of a better term, the so-called social contract. I never accepted it. I have this image of me just walking away from it. And this is before I had a clear idea that something else is possible. I was just walking away. And I would fall down and I would be dragged back. And sometimes I would even walk back voluntarily when I lost it. But sooner or later, I always got up again and started walking away from the legacy of what we have inherited. And then eventually I discovered the power of vision. Because in the absence of vision, you can't walk very far. Right. Because the field within which we live is so compelling that unless we have an equally potent field that pulls us in the direction of vision, we're not going to get there. We just won't have enough capacity. And so one of the things that I say these days is that I am searching for a way to create a field of love that is powerful enough that it can surround the patriarchal field that we live in with love. Right. And that is the only way to transform it, because if you try to fight against it, you are in it. If you try to kill the bad guys, you're back in the game of killing. If you try to control things, you're back in the control paradigm. So there is something very, very powerful and humbling for me about recognizing that the only way forward is soft. With soft qualities. Yeah. So that would be love, mourning, which you encountered, vulnerability, humility, generosity, kindness, all the things that enCOMPASSion does.
The things we're lucky enough to be doing.
Yeah, and so one of the primary things that I focus on now is what we call the vision mobilization framework, which is basically trying to make concrete and practical the move from vision to current reality, in which we don't have a whole lot of capacity. But then the question is, how do we increase capacity, even within the world as it is? And that's a big part of the work. And although the vision mobilization framework as a comprehensive, cohesive framework is quite new, all the elements of it have been there for many years. And so it's like a big new tapestry. Yeah.
I want to just put this into context of the other conversations, the other Living Bridges conversations we've been having, where time and again, there is this invitation to people to dream bigger, to cherish their own dreaming, to trust their intuitive longing for something different. And I'm hearing you say it slightly differently. I hear you call it vision. And I'm wondering, what is it? Is there something that makes can shift from making it from it being a dream to it being more concrete, like a vision?
Two things. One is a dream. It has a slight connotation that it can't happen. A vision has more of a sense we're going somewhere. Yeah. It is possible. And the other is it's more kind of like systematic. It's not like, oh, I have this dream today, oh, let me go for it. Right. It's, what is it that I really want to see happen? And, you know, the people have very different scopes of vision. You know, for me, the vision is always global. For, you know, the entire planet and all of life, even beyond humans. I only work in the human realm, and I take comfort from knowing that research indicates that in the places where humans collaborate well, the physical sustainability of that place and its ecosystems is enhanced. So human collaboration is not random. Human collaboration is the mirror of how life functions in the human realm. So when we embrace that deep kind of collaboration, we realign with the principles of life. It's global, and some people can have a vision just for themselves of who they want to be, how they want to live, or they can have a vision for what kind of family they want to have, or they can have a vision for an organization or whatnot. Yeah. So the scope doesn't have to be as big as mine, but a vision is putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is where I or we are going. It always is taking a stand and saying what we have been told is the only possibility is not true. Yeah. An alternative exists, and I'm going to try to make it happen with whatever little capacity I have.
And this makes such a lot of sense to me. I mean, I'm thinking about it in terms of larger things organizationally, but also in terms of personal things. Like at some point, there's a conscious, at least for me, there was a conscious moment of saying, I'm seeing that there's a game that's being played, and it could be a game or a relationship or paradigm or whatever, but in that moment, I wanted to call it a game. And I said, I don't want to play that game at all. I don't want to play by these rules at all. And at the same time, the moment I did that, that was profoundly lonely and isolating. And that's this, I realize I'm going to a later question earlier in this conversation, but I'm wondering if you could speak to this isolation, no? that might be a part of coming to a point of clarity within.
Yes, because, on a deep level, the socialization that we receive in the cultures that we have, that we live in now, in most of them, sorry, I don't know what is happening, but that socialization forces us to choose between belonging and freedom, where that choice is artificial. And so when you become free, it almost always includes within it a step away from the normative, which is suppression of who you are, suppression of the full range of expression, suppression of needs, suppression of feelings, and towing the line. If you stop towing the line, there is a standing apart. Then you can weave back. You can also then look for other people who share vision and create a togetherness around vision rather than around norms.
Right. And is that kind of the difference between fitting in and true belonging, in a sense?
I think true belonging is deeper than what humans can give each other. It's a relationship with life. It's recognizing that I was brought here through life, and I cannot be outside of life. I think, I may be mistaken, but I think in the Black community in the US, there is a statement that God doesn't make mistakes. And it's not like I believe in God, but God for me is an equivalent for life. There can be all kinds of things, but fundamentally, if I am here and alive, I am part of life. That is the deepest belonging. I don't want to belong to a social order that dictates how I should be. I want to belong in a place where we are flowing with who we are, where we come together with each other, where we live in full choice. And for me, full choice is not about separating. That is in itself part of the either or frame within which we live. For me, choice is within togetherness. That's when...
More about that. What does that mean when you say choice is within togetherness and it's not part of separation?
I don't have to move away from people in order to go for my needs. I can bring my needs into the togetherness alongside everyone else's needs. And then we can figure it out together in a way that works for everyone instead of the either or that we have come to accept as the only way.
Right. And I think, Miki, you're coming to two of these really important threads that were alive for me when we started this conversation. One is around this question of coming together to look at all our needs together, making it work for all of us. That's one layer. And the other layer is this layer of the moment I start believing or trusting that I have inherent value. To me, all the systems that we live in suggest that actually I only have value when I slice parts of myself off, or if I conform to certain ways of being, or if I, make a certain amount of money, then I have more value, I deserve more, etc. And all of those layers. But that very sometimes rather difficult thing to lean into, that I matter just as I am, in itself is a kind of paradigm shift. So these are both of these things came up for me, and I don't know which direction to go in. So maybe I just pass it to you and you go where you.
I'll take both. One is that we get a message that we don't matter unless ... From the moment we are born, we are molded and shaped to fit with how the adult world wants us to be. And if we don't fit, there's a lot of pressure put on us through shaming, through fear, through all kinds of ways. So we forget the preciousness of life that is actually built into all spiritual traditions that exist in the world. Include within it the reverence for life, that every life counts, every bit of life. And so the first thing is to matter to myself, to actually trust myself and the life that flows in me, to move with it rather than against it. When we can do that, and when we can do that together, then we start rebuilding the web of life. So that's one piece. And then the way that life flows through humans is through needs.
Right.
Our needs are the expression of what life is as it flows within us. And so it makes complete sense to me that we make decisions about how to care for everything that we want to care for by understanding the needs. And here there's a nice little catch, because a lot of people think, okay, understanding the needs means hearing everyone, every voice, all the time, in every decision, etc. And one thing that I say is, it's really simple. Think of it like this. I think we have now about 7.9 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
I don't think we have 7.9 different needs. My guess would be we have about 300.
Mm-hmm. And that's
specific.
More, right. And that's much more tangible and holdable in a sense.
Yeah. And so what we need is to know all the needs, not to hear from everyone. And there are methods that allow us to understand what are all the needs that are relevant to a particular situation or decision or context. And when we hold all the needs together, everybody then knows that they are included, even if they themselves didn't speak the need. It's like, oh yeah, so-and-so said this, I don't need to say it again. The only reason why we say, I also want to, is, yes, I agree, is because we believe in numbers games. It's like something matters only if the majority of people wants it.
Yeah.
And for me, majority rule is still an imposition.
Yeah.
It still emerges from believing that a solution that works for everyone cannot be found. And when I work with groups to arrive at decisions, I am listening for the outliers.
Yeah.
I'm listening for the people who express divergent opinions. I invite dissent and disagreement, because this is one of the ways that we bring all the needs to the table, especially because we've been trained to suppress ourselves. In the first or second round, people might not actually put their needs on the table.
Yeah.
And I invite it and then do the magic of integration.
I want to name that these are principles from the process that you've designed, which is called convergent facilitation. I just want to add my voice to this, that might, I mean, I'm sure that, and I know there are many extremely powerful examples of this being used, but even at the grassroots in India, when we did a little bit of work last year, when we could, before the second wave happened, we used principles from convergent facilitation to come to a point of consensus in the community. And it did not require us to listen to all 40 people sitting there. It took maybe an hour and a half, and we had a clear plan of action with, layers and steps. And it had to do with, one, the process, and two, this quality of listening and trust, and this relationship, basically leaning into the trust and letting that kind of
Yes. Yes, I just completed a project that I was with. There were 5 of us supporting visionary community for about a month, very, very intensively. And I understood that in addition to skills and competencies and all of that, there are 2 very, very, very basic things that I do that require a consciousness shift, not just learning this or that skill. And they're very, very simple, both of them. One is that the very basic premise of NVC is something that is within myself. It's not an abstraction, an abstract principle. And that is the assumption that whatever everyone does is an expression of the very same needs that all other humans have.
Yeah.
That is a huge consciousness shift. That enables me to listen to people differently. And the other one is that I actually take people at face value. I believe them in what they say. And if I can't believe them, I say I'm not managing to believe and try to work it out with them. I'm not assuming that I know that they're not telling the truth. I just don't know. What I do know is that I'm not settling as I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm not settling into believing what you're saying. Let's look at it.
Yeah.
But there is a way in which, when people are trusted to be telling the truth, they relax.
Yeah.
So even I have had experiences, I don't remember a single one right now, but I've had experiences where me fully trusting someone at face value led them to own that they weren't telling the truth.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can, again, it's not coming to me right now, but I can resonate with that.
Yeah.
I can resonate with that. And I have this sort of sense of how many times I've been told not to be so naive as to take people at face value. And what you're saying is exactly the opposite. I'm not hearing you say, don't trust your intuition when, something doesn't feel.
No.
Yeah, I'm not hearing that at all. I'm hearing that with that, to be transparent and yet trust what is being said, to work with what has been offered. So I want to touch on something that's been alive for me, and I'd love to hear your take on this, which is around the challenges of sticking to one's values and principles within the context that we're living in. And maybe I'm curious about how that is with all the work that you've done and the work that you're currently doing. How do we do that, and how do we overcome those challenges as they come up?
Overcome is an image that has force within it.
Right.
And as I said earlier, I am looking with others, we are looking to construct a pathway that doesn't have force in it. It's extraordinarily challenging because the paradigm of force and control is so deeply embedded in us that we don't even notice when we do it. That the key is, if we start from the vision that we talked about before, the vision mobilization framework then moves from vision to what is our actual capacity. And there is something extraordinary about being able to be honest about what our capacity is, instead of either overestimating it and, you know, burning out very quickly, or engaging in you know, intensive reactive ways of responding, or underestimating our capacity. Who am I to ...
Yeah.
That's one that you overcame. Oh, see, I just used that same word, overcame. That's one that you worked your way through to where you found the courage and strength to create this really amazing organization that I can't even fathom. And so when you actually can look at your capacity without underestimating, without overestimating, without judging where you have limitations, without thinking that you are more than others where you have strength, just seeing it all as a piece of information, then your values and your purpose are the bridge between the vision and where you are.
Yeah.
In a way that is both visionary and honest about capacity. So the details of that is beyond what we can do right now, but the key is that you only do what is within capacity. And when you only do what is within capacity, both in terms of aligning with your values and in terms of aligning with your purpose, when it's only, all and only what is within capacity, the whole energy that is expended on fighting with yourself, whether individually or collectively, it's not like collectively it's very different. It just, we add fighting with each other. Right. When we are able to really see our own and each other's capacity with completely honest, tender eyes, we build agreements that act like scaffolding, that support us in moving in the direction of the values without effort. I have an example that I use over and over again to explain agreements that are within capacity. Let's say that you and I and 3 other people live together as housemates. And, you know, we are looking at how to divide the house chores. And most places think that you divide it equally, that that's the fair way, the right way to do it. So let's say that somebody has to take the garbage out once a week. There's a day in which the garbage is collected and somebody has to take it out to the street. It would be logical that every week one of us does it. Now, there are 5 of us, and 4 of us really don't like doing it, but are very good at have to. And they're very good at tracking. So 4 weeks, it happens. The 5th week, it's my turn. And I really don't mind doing it, but I'm lousy at tracking. So I don't take it out. And then everybody is resentful and fights with me. And, you know, you see the whole picture. It's an easy picture. Now, if we look at capacity and willingness, what we see is that I would be happy to do it every week, always. Except on the rare week when I can't or really don't have willingness, and then I can ask somebody else to do it. But I'm happy to do it every week, but I won't remember. But you have a real ease in tracking things, and you're willing to remind me every week. Just you send me an email to say, hey, Miki, it's time to take out the garbage. And then the garbage problem is solved. I do it every week. You remind me every week. The three others don't even have to think about the garbage, and it's all within capacity and no more fighting.
Yeah.
That's the simplicity of agreements that are within capacity. And then we have more energy. All the energy that went into the resentment and the fighting is now available to care for vision.
Absolutely. This is something we talked about just before we began, which was about the so-called the middle path as something that can become a compromise. But you're talking about something more than that. It's not just everybody comes together and divides the work up equally. There's this image on the internet recently, which is a piece of pie and somebody sliced, a triangle right at the center of the pie. And there's a lot of conversation about how that's not caring for the whole, because it takes away everybody's, the equity or the equal amounts of pie and crust and so on and so forth. But what I'm hearing you suggest is almost that it depends on what works for each of us. And what is that? How do we make that happen? That's a different quality of coming together.
So if we look at the cake, we really could conceivably have a conversation about how much cake each of us wants and which parts we want and which parts we don't want. If one of us is double the size of the other, why would we get the same size cake? I mean, you wouldn't put so much energy into dividing a cake, but the principles are very simple. If you really look at what the needs are, rather than some abstract notion of fairness, then you divide whatever resources are there based on the needs, based on the capacity, based on the willingness. So, for example, recently we did a course on the vision mobilization through the NBC Academy. And the money that came from that course was divided between us based on need.
Yeah.
And although there were three of us who were doing the training, but one of the three didn't get any money because there was no need.
Yeah.
And we had a number of assistants, and some of them got money and some of them didn't, and not the same amounts. It was all based on what people actually needed for their sustainability. And when you start looking at things through the lens of needs, a whole lot of things become possible that otherwise are beyond reach.
Yeah.
So if I think about the middle way, the middle path, it isn't necessarily exactly in the center between one extreme and another, which is basically what compromise looks like, which is I give up something, you give up something. For me, an integrative solution, which is the true and deep middle path, an integrative solution is taking into consideration all that is important to everyone, what becomes possible. And very often the integrative solution is creative. It changes the terms of the question. It's not anything that anybody thought about ahead of time. We are uniquely wired to solve complex problems with creativity. That's what our big brains are made for.
Yeah.
And when we allow ourselves to be influenced by each other, this act of mutual influencing creates new possibility. That's the integrative path.
It's almost like when we soften into vulnerability, or allow ourselves to be tender and willing to be touched by one another, then we can get as creative as we wanted it. I can imagine this is similar at the level of cake and at the level of, money, and beyond that to the level of politics or power, and how we share power and how we consider one another. Yeah.
I think it's also at the level of how do we solve the questions of global warming. I have this picture in mind that if anybody did it, I would go and do my part of it. I'm not good at convening, but if somebody brought together CEOs of energy companies, climate scientists, a select group of heads of states, activists, impacted communities and whatever. I mean, I could design who needs to be there and how to bring them together. If somebody did that and I sat with them, I am 100% confident that we would be able to come up with policy recommendations that all of them would say yes to. And then the rest of the world would, of course, accept them.
And there's something about what you say, which is about invoking or inviting capacities that are not the most joyful for you. This is not there's parts which are absolutely yours, which you are joyful and happy to do. And then there's parts that you don't want to do, which is this business of bringing people together, or, I don't know, the logistics of arranging something like this.
Oh, no, it's not the logistics. It's not even that I don't want to do. I'm just not good at it.
Right, exactly. And then
I don't have I don't have the connections. I don't have, I am limited in my capacity to, bridge differences, even though I can do it when everyone is together and there's trust, but in an environment of low trust for myself, for something that I want, I don't have that strength. So what? Yeah. Then there are other people who have that strength who work with me.
Exactly. And for me, this is calling me back to one of the core lessons of relief work, which is that you can only do what you are good at within the area of influence that you have. And beyond that line, there is this, one can be there. I guess how much trust I have in me determines how much trust I can have beyond that line. And
totally.
Yeah. And I want to capture one more piece that you said, which I found very, I'm really grateful that you used the word bridge when you spoke about values. That values are a kind of, living bridge between where I am right now and where I would like to be, and what my vision really is.
Yeah.
I've been sort of trying to find a moment to invite you to speak about your projects more in depth. And is there anything you would like to share?
Yes. I am, there is the Nonviolent Global Liberation Community that we touched on, which came out of, many things led to it, but one of them is that experimenting with possibilities create something that if you're just in the trenches, I don't want to use that word, but anyway, I already did. When you are trying to support frontline communities or fighting about specific causes that exist, your attention is there on creating change, and that's powerful work, and you can support people and do all kinds of things. And we still need, just this morning, I came up with this new word, vision research. What's possible when we really focus on vision and aiming to create the most optimal conditions that we can create? I know that is in itself a form of privilege, but even within that, we can learn a lot that can then support us in supporting people like you who work in non-optimal conditions. One of the many things that we do is there's a group of us that has been vagabonding for a while. And we, a couple of us have been doing it for 2 years.
Wow.
And others have joined us in the last year, and others may still join us, we don't know. And within a year, we're planning to find a place to be somewhere in the world and build a community, beginning tiny, but with a vision of creating a community within which we study and experiment with how far we can take ourselves out of the existing paradigm and live in line with the vision of where, you know, we operate fully within the gift economy. NGL, the Nonviolent Global Liberation Community, is completely running on gift economy. We just a few months ago did calculations that if we needed to pay people to do all the work that is happening within NGL, it would be 4 times more than the flow of money that exists now, which means that 75% of the work that happens within NGL happens without money at all.
Right.
And, you know, there are all kinds of gifting as we move from place to place. For example, right now, where you see me, it's a house that was gifted to us by the family of a student who is studying with me, with us, and is so touched by the potential of the work that she has requested her parents, and they agreed. They don't even know us, and we're staying in this house for 10 days as a gift. It's an amazing thing. There's something that happens, and I bet you also know it, that when you fully surrender to service of a certain kind and operate in gift and operate in unilateral giving, then resources come. People want to support you. So that's what we are doing. And it's pretty radical. It puts us at odds with the exchange economy, with things that we talked about before, about belonging and freedom, all of these things. It puts us at odds with that. It is like almost a vertical path of liberation, because all of us confront our own liberation edges and work our way through them to more and more individual and collective integration of new principles.
I can relate with that to an extent. I mean, we're not as radically out there with the gift economy as NGL has been. And I mean, the vagabonding sounds like so much fun and deeply challenging at the same time.
Exactly.
And at the same time, the Living Bridges conversations are an experiment in this kind of unilateral giving. There is an invitation to contribute and to support, and there will be some slides at the end saying, you know, help us keep going. But there is no way to put a cost on these conversations, because they are actually invaluable. And what we learn from this, we hope to carry on forever. So I think that brings me to my absolute last question. And this is maybe a more abstract question, or maybe not, I don't know. And it is about this word that you just used, liberation. What does that mean? And maybe more specifically, within the context of where we are, what is liberation? How do we lean into that?
Liberation for me is freeing ourselves from the individual and collective and institutional and all the ways that we live within the paradigm of scarcity, separation, and powerlessness. So ultimately, it's about restoring the world of life that functions on flow, togetherness, and choice. We restore it usually in the reverse order, because once choice has been taken away, we can't do togetherness and we can't do flow. So we need to restore choice first. But fundamentally, it's restoring choice so that we can restore togetherness, so that we can restore flow and realign ourselves with the flow of life. And in practical ways, what it means is seeing where you're limited and putting together practices that support you in functioning in line with how you want to function, and understanding the systemic nature of your limitations so you don't blame yourself for them.
I can relate with that, but I'm also remembering that one of the edges for me was around shame. It came up in, I think, again during your workshop. And I've actually done over the last 4 or 5 years, that's been my focus, is to continually come back to those edges of shame and what that means in terms of my wounding around belonging and stuff like that. And holding that, knowing some parts of that are mine, taking responsibility for it, but not I guess, blaming myself as an individual for something that is a collective
Yes.
wound. Yeah.
Yes. And for me, the path of working with shame is pretty rigorous at the practical level, because it means what shame does is shame tells you to not do something.
Yes.
It constrains you from doing. So if you feel shame and the thing that you want to do is aligned with your values, then you do it even with the shame. It's like basically going, not heeding the call of shame. Even when shame tells you not to do it, you do it so long as it's aligned with your values.
Yeah. Within, of course, that capacity. So not to the point that I'm triggered, but within that capacity.
Yes.
Stretching enough that I can stay with some degree of discomfort. I think that
entirely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
yes. Without discomfort, we stay in where we are. With too much discomfort, we stay where we are.
Yeah.
It just needs to be just the, what I call strategic discomfort, enough discomfort to get us out of the stupor that we live in, and not so much that we go into alarm bells.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember hearing from somebody, because discomfort is also around, I mean, there's also a quality of fear around it often. And I remember hearing from, again, these are these little, I just want to, I so want to highlight that there are so many people talking about this. I mean, there's you and me and all the people who've been in these conversations, but sometimes I hear these words from, people driving cars or driving autos in India, or people who live in slums, and it's the same quality of understanding. That instead of running away from my fear or my discomfort, if I take one step towards it and do one thing about it. This is something an auto driver told me at one point. And he heard it from a sort of local healer guy who said, you get anxious, that's fine, just do one thing about it. And I thought that was just so beautiful, because knowledge is available to us. It's around us as long as we're open.
Yeah. Yes, one step at a time, you go further than trying to do more than you can, and then it backfires.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that this feels like a good moment to also bring us very gently to a close. I am overwhelmed with how much there is in this conversation. And I'm also noticing there's a little quality of overwhelm within saying, oh, but I have 25,000 more questions. So maybe we find another time as well. And before we close, is there anything that you would like to say as a closing statement, or just something to bring us to closure?
Trust, restoring trust. And where there's no trust, then faith is needed to bridge over the gap of trust. And I have complete faith that we can do it at the same time as knowing that we are in a really terrible situation globally. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's closing the conversation. Thank you so much, Miki. And thank you everyone for joining us. There are some slides after this which are about supporting Living Bridges. So if you can, no matter how big or small the contribution, please do give us some money so that we can keep doing our work. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.